So there's a few things, if you do them right now in the fall, that will really set you up for success in the spring with the garden. And honestly, if you can do these every single fall, then you are going to have less weeds and you're going to continually to improve that aspect of the garden every single year. You're going to have that compound effect. So that is to remove anything that is beginning to go to seed or produce seeds. So that's when you have flowering weeds and or flowers that begin to flower. Once they age and mature beyond the blossom stage, then these are all going to become seeds that are then going to reseed throughout the garden. These right here, this is a little like a wild amaranth, I believe, that will do the same thing. So these little, they're kind of pretty actually. I will pick them when they're bigger and use them in floral arrangements in the house. But if these are left to dry, then all of this little fuzzy part here is going to become new seeds. And so if I remove these in the late summer, early fall, before they've been allowed to go to seed and to spread everywhere, then I am definitely going to be cutting down on the seeds that would then populate and grow and become weeds in next year's garden. However, there are probably a few things in the garden that you may want to allow to go to seed. Case in point, this is all dill. Now, as you can tell, this is all dyed. We're at the end of the warm weather growing season here. We have actually a big cold front is moving in right now, so it's breezy as it's getting ready to blow in a big cold front and storm for this weekend. So that's why I'm out here in the garden getting ready to do some cleanup, because I know we're going to get to be turning. But this is dill. So I actually could come out here if I wanted to and harvest quite a bit of this, because this is just dill. This is dill seed. So that's kind of one of the fun things about dill, is you can harvest the leaves when they're green, and that's your dill weed. But then your dill seed, which can also be used for pickling, and this is actually, and as well as the seed that will grow. And you can see this is so dry that as I put this in my hand and it's windy out right now, it's actually picking up and blowing away some of these seeds. But this is also the seed that I would need to plant for my dill next year. However, because I love dill, I use it obviously in pickling, but I also use the dill weed, and we'll dry that and use that to make homemade ranch mix with fish. And if you're a popcorn lover like me, make your popcorn, use lots of butter, because butter makes everything taste better. And if you're having popcorn, you really need to have butter. Now that we've established that, use your salt, a little bit of garlic powder, and take a little bit of dried dill weed and sprinkle that on there, and it's homemade ranch popcorn. We have it every single week. It is so good. So I like lots of dill because I like to use that. Of course, then all the pickling and fermenting that I do, we use a lot of dill in that. But I don't ever plant dill. So I don't need all of this to go to seed in the garden, because this is actually quite a bit. The other great thing about dill is it is a favorite of ladybugs. So if you have aphids in and around your garden, ladybugs naturally prey on aphids. So you want to have plants that ladybugs are attracted to, so that ladybugs stay in your garden and come into your garden and then can eat those aphids, which can be a definite garden pest. So that's another reason I like to let dill go kind of crazy in the garden. But I don't need all of this to go to seed, but I will leave some of this, and some of this is already dry enough that it has scattered and blown. And so I will have a ton of dill that will just naturally come up next year in the garden. I never have to plant dill. I don't have to buy seed. I don't have to start it indoors, any of that. And I've got dill that just will naturally come up all throughout the garden, and I just let it do that. So there's some plants that you'll want to do that with, and you will want to let them flower and go to seed, but usually it's not with the plants that we consider weeds, which is what some of these are. Now, here I've got some marigolds, and so I will let those continue to dry out. These ones, the blossoms are getting really wet though, because it's pretty, we're pretty wet in this stage right now, so I probably won't get to be able to harvest much of them. And then here is my calendula and orange nasturtium. So I did not plant any of these nasturtiums by seed this year. I planted nasturtiums in the garden, probably like 5 years ago. I started using orange nasturtium as companion planting and pest control to repel the cabbage moth. And so it now, because I've let it just go to seed so many years, it will naturally self-seed, and where I don't want it, I'll pull it out. I did have my garlic planted throughout here, but the garlic's already been pulled, and so it works really well. But if you don't want it to go to seed, you could see then if I didn't want this in the garden and I kept just letting this go every year and not pulling them, how quickly it will proliferate in an area if allowed to. The calendula is another one that I let go to seed. I don't have to ever plant this anymore either. This right here, as this dries out more, this little green part beneath these petals, this is a spent blossom. These will turn brown, and that's actually, you can see a little bit better on this one, they're not brown yet. But these will become brown, and once those are dried, then those are the seeds. So I can either gather and collect those, or I need to make sure I remove it if I don't want it to self-seed throughout the garden. So sometimes it can be of benefit, but there's quite a few of these that I don't want to continue seeding, so I need to make sure that I get them removed. And even though we're talking about mitigating your weeds by making sure you're pulling these out for next year, you also want to go through, and if there's any plants that have disease, so I had early blight on my potato patch, any of those leaves or plants that had any type of disease, make sure at the very least, if you don't have time to do anything else, that you remove those diseased plants, or if they had a lot of insect damage where they could have been laying eggs on them, make sure that you remove those as fast as possible. Don't let them break down and overwinter throughout the fall months and into the winter months, because then you're letting more of that disease and or insects harbor in your soil, and that can be really detrimental, not only for the next growing season, but for years thereon out. So if you just remove the heads of the flowers or the weeds before they go to seed, and anything that's diseased or pest ridden in the fall, you are going to be setting yourself up for success for years to come in the garden. For more specific tips on how to keep weeds down in the garden naturally, watch this video. And because we are leaning into fall now, there are some plants that you can actually overwinter in the garden without pulling them and eat from them all fall and winter long, and you can learn about that in this video.